Okay, let's just get right into it. For decades, space was this exclusive club for superpowers, right? Incredibly expensive, progress was super slow. And then, SpaceX showed up. And look, this wasn't just another company with a cool rocket. It was a complete and total teardown of an entire industry. So today we're going to unpack the blueprint for how they pulled it off. And if you want to understand just how dominant they are, all you have to do is look at this number, over 130. That's how many launches SpaceX managed in 2024 alone. I mean, that completely shattered global records. This isn't just winning a race, folks. This is lapping the competition again and again and again. So that leads to the big question, right? How? How did a relative newcomer, basically an outsider, manage to not just compete with, but completely take over an industry that was propped up by governments and these legacy giants for more than half a century? Well, the answer, it's not just one thing. It's a whole system. And to really get that system, we're going to break it down into a few key pillars. We'll kick things off with a massive economic disruption they caused. Then we'll dive into the three core strategies that made it all possible. You know, the famous reusability revolution, their unique way of building things, and a culture that's all about thinking from scratch. And then, at the end, we'll see how it all plugs into a much, much bigger vision. Okay, first things first. You gotta understand that SpaceX didn't just make rocket launches a bit cheaper. No, they completely rewrote the economic rulebook for even getting into space. I mean, just look at this price gap. It's staggering. Arianespace, one of the main competitors, they charge about $160 million for a launch. SpaceX, around $75 million. That is less than half the price. All of a sudden, putting a satellite in orbit went from being this nation-state level expense to something way more people could actually afford. And you know, being this affordable didn't just open up the commercial market, it made them absolutely essential to the US government. A report from Tiger Brokers puts it perfectly, saying they went from being this disruptor to a core contractor. And why? It's simple. They offer reliable, cheap access to space that literally no one else can touch. So how in the world did they get those costs so incredibly low? Well, that brings us right to our first pillar, the reusability revolution. And let me tell you, this was not just some cool engineering trick, it was a fundamental shift in the economics of spaceflight. For decades, rockets were basically treated like giant, expensive, disposable bottles. You'd spend hundreds of millions to build one, use it for a few minutes, and then just let the most expensive parts either burn up in the atmosphere or crash into the ocean. SpaceX just came along and asked a really simple question. Hey, what if we didn't do that? What if we could land that first stage booster and just fly it again? The math behind that question is actually pretty straightforward, but it is so powerful. With an old-school expendable rocket, you're paying the full price for brand new hardware every single time. But with a reusable rocket, you take the massive cost of that main booster and you divide it by how many times you fly it. Sure, you have to add in refurbishment costs, but the price per launch, it just plummets. You know, I saw this analogy in a discussion online and I absolutely love it because it makes the whole concept so easy to grasp. Nobody buys a brand new car for every single road trip, right? No. You refuel it, you get it serviced, and you use it again and again. SpaceX just applied that exact same logic to rockets. Okay, so landing the rocket is one thing, but that's only half the battle. You also have to build the thing efficiently to begin with. And this brings us to pillar number 2, a manufacturing philosophy that honestly has more in common with a car factory than a traditional aerospace company. This quote from a former supplier on Reddit, it really gives you a raw sense of why SpaceX decided to build so much stuff themselves. They're talking about intense pressure, razor-thin profit margins. The old-school aerospace suppliers were just too slow, way too expensive, and they weren't designed for the kind of breakneck speed iteration that SpaceX needed. So what did they do? They decided to do it all in-house. And there's a name for this strategy. It's called vertical integration. So instead of dealing with this huge, complicated web of outside suppliers, SpaceX chose to design and build almost everything. We're talking engines, flight computers, you name it, right there in their own factory. This gives them total control over the three things that matter most: speed, cost, and quality. And they didn't just dip their toes in the water, they went all in on this idea. Some estimates say SpaceX is about 85% vertically integrated. Just think about that for a second. The vast majority of what goes into a Falcon 9 rocket is made by SpaceX in a SpaceX factory. That is almost unheard of in modern manufacturing, especially at this scale. And this quote from SpaceX co-founder Tom Mueller, it really reveals the obsession behind it all. The goal isn't just to build a rocket, it's to build a factory that can churn out rockets at a speed and scale that people honestly thought was impossible. Their inspiration isn't some other aerospace giant, it's the incredibly efficient production line that makes a simple can of soda. But a manufacturing model that's this radical, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It comes from a core cultural pillar at SpaceX, rethinking every single problem from the ground up, from first principles. Musk himself points right at the enemy here: process for the sake of process. In traditional aerospace, you have decades of bureaucracy that created this culture where the default answer to everything was, well, that's how we've always done it. SpaceX was pretty much founded on the idea of questioning that default. And wow, the difference is just night and day. On one side, you have old space, which NASA itself has described as having tons of management layers and these cost-plus contracts that actually rewarded companies for spending more money. And then you have the SpaceX culture, which is built on small, nimble teams that are empowered to experiment, to fail fast, and to iterate quickly, always designing for lower cost and reusability. But you have to remember, this culture, it was forged in fire. It's easy to forget just how close they came to complete and total failure. After their first 3 launches literally blew up, they had just enough money left for one more try. That 4th launch, it worked. But by Christmas Eve of 2008, the company was literally hours away from going bankrupt. And then, 2 days later, the phone rings. It's NASA, with a $1.6 billion contract that saved the entire company. In that incredible near-death experience, it just perfectly captures this core philosophy. It's about persistence when the odds are completely stacked against you. It was never just about building a company. It was about chasing a mission that was so important, they were willing to risk everything for it. So let's tie all of this together now. The crazy cost disruption, the reusability, that factory mindset, the first principles culture. You see, these aren't just separate strategies. They are all interlocking pieces of a much more audacious vision. Because when you zoom out, you realize that SpaceX isn't really a standalone company at all. It's part of an ecosystem. You've got Tesla's work in AI and manufacturing, which helps SpaceX. You've got Starlink, which brings in revenue and gives them a reason to launch thousands of satellites. And now there's this unifying AI layer being built to optimize all of them, all in service of that one ultimate vision: making humanity a multiplanetary species. It's like a giant flywheel. Cheaper launches from SpaceX make something like Starlink's global internet possible. The profits from Starlink then help pay for the development of the next generation rocket, Starship. And what's Starship being designed for? Mars. Each part of the business model helps push the others forward faster and faster, which really just leaves us with this final, massive question. When you've built a system that so completely dominates Earth's orbit, a system that literally funds its own colossal ambitions, does the goal of colonizing another planet start to sound less like science fiction and maybe a lot more like the next logical line item on the balance sheet?